Hello and welcome to another episode of the Calumet Wilderness with Sam Love. I am your host, Sam Love. It's October, it's Halloween season, it's time for an eerie adventure. Stick around. So I thought this year what I'd do is look at some of the old cemeteries in Gary, because there is some fantastic people's history, there is some fantastic ecological history to be learned by poking around in here. So today I'm starting close to home in what we know as Miller Cemetery, aka Bethel Lutheran Cemetery. So let's have a look around. The earliest burial, and I don't think there's a stone that remains, but the earliest burial was the 2 or 3 year old son of the man of whom this Miller community gets its name from. He was a construction engineer with the Michigan Southern Railroad, and apparently tragically lost his young son while living out here, 1851. It's actually still an active cemetery. It's maintained by the Bethel Lutheran Church in Miller, and there have been 2 burials, I think, at least in the past couple of years. One of whom, according to Find a Grave, is the granddaughter, if you can believe this, of the immigrant, the Swedish immigrant who owned this land and donated it as a cemetery back in the 1880s. A lot of Swedish names in here. Miller, after the 1850s, sort of a beacon for a number of Swedish families. In fact, you can still see that on the religious landscape in the community, the old Swedish church, and then the other one, Chapel of the Dunes, that was for the English-speaking generation. So you see a lot of these families buried in here throughout the late 19th century and well into the 20th century and beyond. I am standing before the resting place of the man who for decades owned this land. It was originally a family plot, and then he donated, I think, these 2 acres to the community to use. John Victor Johnson is a Swedish immigrant. I think he arrived sometime in the 1870s. Swedes, in, I don't want to say large numbers because it was a small community, but you had a number of Swedish families settling here in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. Definitely a Swedish flavor to the names on the stones in this cemetery here. It's like this little capsule of early North Calumet region pioneer history out here. But yet you can really get a sense of what this natural dune area would have looked like, because it has been very well preserved. Yeah, according to Find a Grave, there are 245 memorials listed here. That's just what's listed. That doesn't mean everyone that's ever been in here or who is in here. So it's a bit larger than I thought and remembered. Come out here every once in a while. And it is really beautiful with fall color right now. It really does have a nature preserve meets cemetery feel here, because there's so many native plants growing up and around the stones here. So the cemetery really goes all the way to the back of the dune, the highest part, and then the slope is pretty steep down into a trailer park in US 20. And the Carr family, that's an important family in Miller history. Carr family, another major family out here that lived in the vicinity of Lake Street Beach and Marquette Park. Drusilla, who is the daughter-in-law of the couple buried here, is well known for holding her ground when the city wanted to take her land from her. There's the Weekly Rate Motel on the west side. There's the trailer park on the east side to the south. To the north, you've got the South Shore tracks as well as US 12 Dunes Highway. So this is really cut off from its natural environment. Just using some of the old maps and resources, I think this would have sort of been the southernmost extent of this shoreline here. And I think if you could go back here in Miller's earliest days or just before and look out, because the little Calumet River is about a mile, this would have been sort of the southern edge of the dunes. And if you could look out, you'd see, flat, sort of mostly a wetland until you got to the river. And today it's just totally cut off. Highways, railroads, channelized river, all of that. So really hard to get a sense. Let that go by. No historical, ecological context left. This is just a dune that is just cut off and surrounded by development. Heads up if you come out here, there is a lot of poison ivy. Seems like the majority of the stones here are from the early to mid 20th century, although it's pretty well dispersed throughout the centuries. This dune is part of the lower Tolleston shoreline, which puts it in the 2,000 to 4,000 year old range. It's on the southern end of that, so I think the older date would be more appropriate. I will put a link in the description to a really good website by local historian Steve Spicer, who has done a lot of digging into the history of this community and this cemetery. And one of the things he points out is that this historical marker up here has some errors. So according to Steve, there were no fatalities in the 1917 explosion at the Etna power plant. Buried in here are the victims of explosions from as far back as the 1880s into the 19-teens. But according to him, there were no fatalities in 1917. So hopefully that can get corrected soon. Keeping with the eerie theme, if you go to Steve's website, you'll see he also talks about how a lot of unknowns were buried in here. People found dead along the railroad or along some of the wetlands in here. So probably some restless souls. Yeah, so that's Miller Cemetery. If you come out, good luck trying to find it. I'll leave you to that adventure. Have a happy Halloween. See you in another adventure, another eerie adventure in the Calumet wilderness.